In this video, we will cover how to evaluate your project idea and write a proposal. It is the case that not every interesting project is necessarily a good fit for a course project, and so we need to have this conversation about what makes a project a good fit for this particular course. Here are some guidelines that might help you to evaluate your idea on your own. So you can essentially ask 5 important questions. Here are the questions. The first one is this problem real? Right? Is it real, and is it a specific? Do you know people, actual people who have this problem? And especially if you're part of those problems, so this is a problem that is familiar to you, you sort of understand the pain point, that would make it a better proposal. The next question you need to ask yourself, given that this is a AI-enabled software engineering course, is that whether there is a clear AI component. So we don't want the AI to be shoehorned into the project. We want there would be a clear need for using AI to build this application and to deliver some features that AI is essential in them. And so when you think about that, we also want to make sure that the extent to which you use AI is not just building a chatbot. So you want to think about what AI building blocks you're going to be using. Are you going to have retrieval? You will use memory, tool calling, you will have some agentic workflows. Now, the next thing you need to think about is the scope of your project, right? So you got to think about, is this something that 5-6 people can build it over 4 iterations in a semester? So it might be the case that the project is too big. And so if that is the case, we may be able to try to prune it and make it more focused to something that you can work on over the course of a semester. The other problem, which is often more difficult to solve, is that if the project is too small. And so if that is the case, we may have to move to a different project idea. And the other thing that you got to think about is whether you can show progress incrementally. Is this something that we can see some interesting features after 1 or 2 iterations, or is this something that the only way that we can see some interesting functionality is at the end of the semester, where you implemented sort of a lot of infrastructure to be able to get to that point? Now, ideally, we want to have something that you can show incremental progress on it. The other thing is the technology learnable? You got to look at where you are at, the skill set and the skill level of the team members, and see what is it that you're trying to learn. Are you planning to learn several different frameworks, technologies, territories that you've never explored before? You gotta need to be realistic about how much you can take on in a semester. So that's another thing that we're gonna need to talk about. And sometimes we can make some adjustments to be able to kind of lean on the strengths and the skills that you already have. There may be cases that you're very ambitious and you're very interested about a project, but just the extent of the new things that you need to experience would not make it a reasonable project for a semester, because you have to spend most of your time just getting up and running with a new framework or technology, and you wouldn't be able to deliver something meaningful by the end of the semester. All right, so let me speak a bit more about how you're going to scope your application and how the deliverables work. So you will be building your project in 4 2-week iterations, and you need to think about the way this works is it sort of follows the agile methodology. And so the idea is not something like, hey, I'm going to spend the first iteration, build the entire data model and design the database, and then the next iteration I'm going to work on the back end, and then the iteration after that I'm going to work on the front end, and then I'll document it and test it. That's not how we want to organize the work. What we want to do is to every iteration pick a few features and then build and deliver those features. So by the end of the first iteration, when we look at the app, it should be at a stage that somebody can actually work with it. And that means you're going to be touching the entire stack, the back end, the database, the front end, but you will not be building everything into the application. So it's a good idea that you think about the features that your proposed project has and sort of lay them out in in a roadmap that looks at 4 iterations and think about what are the things that you need to work on earlier and what are the things that you can work on later in the semester. Let's also talk about the technology requirement. So we're going to have some defaults, a sort of a happy path, and then if there are good reasons to deviate from this path, we can have a conversation about it. So I want everybody to build full stack web app. And the reason that I think this is a good choice is that the web apps are easy to deploy. You can use platforms like Vercel, Netlify. They run everywhere. So any device, irrespective of the platform that you're using, as long as they have a browser and internet, you can access the app. That makes it easier for you in terms of having less of a problem with dealing with DevOps, and also with us, the teaching staff, to work with your application. And also you should consider that when you build web apps, more or less what you're learning is transferable to other applications. In fact, a lot of native apps are just web apps packaged for those platforms. So there are cases perhaps that you need something very specific to a particular platform. Like maybe you're building an app that the different ways that you touch the screen and the pressure that you insert when you touch a screen, that is taken into account. For whatever reason, it's part of the project that you're building. Well, in that case, and if you're thinking that, my users are all going to be using smartphones and using their hand to interface with the application, then that's not something that building a web app would be a good choice for it. Browser is not good. It doesn't have its same APIs as native applications. But in most other cases, if you're building utility apps, somebody's got to log in, somebody's going to work with some resources. You create things, delete things, update things, you interact with some maybe like a chat bot. So for most other cases, web app is enough, and it just makes life easier for everybody in the team to get up and running, not have trouble with the DevOps side of it, and just focus on actually building the application and especially building the AI features of the application. Now, the cherry off the top is that web apps are popular, they're well documented, there are a lot of resources out there on the internet, which means that if you're looking for something, you're going to have more help available to you. And also that means that if you're using AI tools as coding assistants, they probably have seen this plethora of resources during their training. So if you're using conventional technologies, AI coding assistants are going to be more capable in helping you out because you're sort of tailoring to where their strengths are. Now, on that point, there are a lot of different technology stacks that you can use to still build a web application. Now, the one that, again, it's our default and I need you to work with is to use TypeScript. And so there are many reasons for doing this. Like if you're building a web app, then the front end of it is going to be in JavaScript, and TypeScript is just a superset of JavaScript, which adds things like types at compile time. And so if you build the backend with TypeScript as well, then you're basically using one language. A lot of the students coming to this class have taken full stack JavaScript, which we basically teach them web development. And even though the course is called full stack JavaScript, we do teach them TypeScript. So it is a good fit given the prerequisites of this course. There's great tooling support for TypeScript. Pretty much every provider of LLMs that are out there, and they're giving you SDK, they provided both in TypeScript and in Python. And probably one legitimate question, a reasonable question, is that what about Python? Given that we're building AI-enabled apps, Python is sort of the language of choice when it comes to ML AI. And that's true. The ecosystem for Python is definitely a richer ecosystem when it comes to machine learning. But you need to take into account that you're not really building this is not a machine learning course. You're not dealing with enhancing different models, doing data analysis and things like that. You're building an app. It's a software engineering course. And so most of the ML related features of the application, you're going to be using them as a service. So somebody's providing a service and you just need to interact with that service. Now, having said that, again, if there is a good reason, depending on your proposal, the idea that you have, to use a different stack or even to build something other than a web app, I'm certainly open to having that conversation with you, and we can collaborate to come up with something that is a good fit both for this course and for the idea that you have in terms of developing your application. Now, finally, speaking of the tech stack, I'm also going to give you a starter code that is in TypeScript, that is a web application, and it's an added advantage if you sort of stick to the happy path, the suggestions that we have. It's going to make your life easier to get started faster and really focus on what makes your app different from every other app that is out there. So things like tooling, setup, deployment, authentication, all of these things will be built into this starter code for you, so you can quickly jump into building the real idea that you have for that project. All right, so I'm gonna wrap up with what is required of you. At the end of the first week, you're going to be giving us the team agreement, which is when you're going to sort of form teams. The second week, the expectation is that you have a project proposal, and so you need to submit this proposal, and I will be showing you some examples of proposal during the lecture, but generally speaking, you sort of need to answer at least these 4 questions in that proposal. What is the problem that you're solving? And so you really need to specify the problem, the solution to that problem, and the users for that application. And then you need to specify what AI features you're using as part of your solution. So we need to be very clear about that. And you also need to sort of very briefly lay out the core features of the application and the technologies that you're planning to use. And once we have the proposal and the proposals were approved, then we're going to go and iterate on the proposal and create a more detailed requirement and specification, and also plan and map those into a roadmap for iterations.